Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. To those of you who are subscribed to my channel, sorry, I know I'm a little bit late to the game. To those of you who are new to my channel, I am Rux, and here we're going to talk about all things astrology. But first, let me tell you guys, let me share with you this very important slice of my life. Something hugely important has happened ever since we've last had a chance to talk. I've got a cat, and you'll see I am very much in love with him. Whoever follows me on Instagram can probably recognize the fact that he's already taken over my social channels. His name is Max, and oh my god, he's amazing. I'm so happy to have a cat. But going back to why you're really here, you probably want to hear more about the houses in astrology. So I thought I'd start a bit of a new series. Let me know if this is a good idea or not. Let me know if you like it or not. About the basics in astrology, because I know a lot of you are interested in finding out more about how natal charts work and how you interpret a natal chart and how you can find out more about yourselves. And this is something that has been pointed out actually to a few people who I've done natal charts for, natal chart readings for. The fact that understanding houses and how houses work in astrology has been very important for them from a self-awareness point of view. But let's go back to the nitty-gritty. So today we're going to talk about all the houses in astrology. They are 12 in total. And then I'm going to go more in-depth and take each house by itself, and we shall dissect it together. So, houses in astrology as opposed to zodiac signs. So zodiac signs are fixed divisions of the ecliptic, and they refer to an annual cycle, whereas houses in astrology and more specifically, when we look at someone's birth chart, are divisions of a daily cycle. So in order to find out how your natal chart is divided, basically, you have to know the time when you were born. That's why the exact time when you were born is so important when someone is interpreting your natal chart for you. There are several houses systems in astrology, equal houses system, which is very simple and easy to use, but the most popular house system, and the one that I am a big fan of and that I use when I do natal chart readings for my clients, is the Placidus System. If you've never seen a birth chart in your life and you don't know what it looks like, you might be asking yourselves, what on earth is she talking about? So your birth chart and anyone else's birth chart is represented by a circle, which is divided into 12 slices that we call houses. Each of these houses governs some areas in an individual's life, and the planets that inhabit these houses, basically the planets that were in specific places in your chart at the exact time when you were born, channel their energies in order to make you who you really are. Let me know if that's too complicated for you guys to get into. I mean, if you're not very familiar with astrology, I might need to take a step back and introduce you a little bit more to what this actually means. But let's begin already with what the houses govern in someone's life. So, according to astrology, there are 12 houses in anyone's natal chart, and in general in astrology. They are all governed by a certain sign. So the first house in astrology, guys, you might have guessed it already, it is governed by Aries, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. The first house is actually governed by someone's rising sign. So that's why it's so important to know the time when you were born in order to figure out what your rising sign is and what your first house is governed by. The first house, along with the rising sign, govern our persona, govern the mask that we put on when we go out into the world. If I'm going to use this metaphor that those of you who have gotten a natal chart reading from me know already, and you're very familiar with it. If you guys were to think of yourselves as being a house, like a building, your first house and your rising sign would be the front door. through the front door, people get inside the building, so that's the first point of interaction. And you guys, in order to get outside of yourselves and out into the world, have to go out through the front door. So the first house is basically the lens through which we see the world and the world sees us. It's the first impression that we make on people. It's how people perceive us before they get to know different facets of our personality. And the first house also rules our physical body. So that's why planets located in the first house, such as Venus in the first house, makes an individual very beautiful and very attractive from a physical point of view. If you have Mars in the first house, you might be a little bit accident prone, and so on and so forth. So that is how the first house functions in our lives. It also governs our personality because if you come to think about it, our personality is a mixture of our innate features and the features that we're born with and the skills that we're born with, but also it's a result of the reactions that we get from people. So our personality is shaped throughout our lives. Well, it's shaped the most in childhood, but basically other people's reactions and how they interact with us are very important in shaping our personality. The second house in astrology is ruled by Taurus, and in general, by astrologers, it's called the house of money. It's the house of earned income. It is the house that tells us a great deal about your movable property, so the values and the material things that you can move around, such as money. It doesn't tell us anything about your immovable, I don't know, I have to find the right word, property, such as houses and real estate, because that side is governed by the fourth house. But basically, the sign that governs your second house can tell us what sort of activities you should be engaging in order to make money, what sort of attitude you have towards money. The second house is also the house of values, of the things that we value, including how we value ourselves. So, for instance, if someone has the sun in their second house, they might have their self-value very much tied with the amount of money that they make. So they might feel like their ego is dependent upon the amount of money that they make. The third house in astrology, guys, is ruled by Gemini, and it's the house of communication. It is the house of day-to-day travel, of short-distance travel. It is the house of day-to-day learning, of the things that we have to learn on a daily basis. It's also the house of sales and the house of commerce. So people with planets in the third house are very good communicators. They're very curious, and they're very likely to engage in an activity that involves sales or commerce or even transportation, because the third house is ruled by Mercury as a planet, and it involves a lot of moving back and forth. The fourth house in astrology, guys, is ruled by Cancer. The fourth house is representative of our home, of our family, of our roots, of our history, of our personal history, of our childhood, and any planets that we have here can give us an indication as to what sort of relationship you have with your family, what sort of parents you might have had, what sort of history you might have had, and also it tells us something about the type of home that you lived in, the type of homes that you are likely to live in this house, and whether you're going to have several houses or not, or if you're going to move around or not. The fifth house, guys, and one of my personal favorites, is the house of romantic love. It's the house of children, the house of creativity, the house of fun more than anything. It's the house of our inner child. Any planets here, and the sign that governs your fifth house. In general, in astrology, it's ruled by Leo. Leo is the soul of the party, but you guys might have like your fifth house governed by I don't know, any other sign. So my fifth house is actually governed by Scorpio. Pretty intense, I know. So any planets here and the sign that governs it tells us a lot about the sort of fun activities that you like to engage in, how creative you are, your relationship with creativity in general. It tells us a great deal about children, how you treat children, whether you're going to have children or not, how many of them you will have, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, the sort of people you're likely to have a crush on. The 6th house is ruled by Virgo in astrology in general, but again, this depends on the time when you were born, if that's the case for you. My 6th house is ruled by Sagittarius. Way to go. The 6th house is the house of day-to-day work, so it's not, sorry guys, it's not the house of career, it's the house of work, it's the house of daily responsibilities, of the things that we have to do on a daily basis. It's the house of service to other people. It's not the most fun house out there, unless, for instance, I don't know, you've got Jupiter in your 6th house, and then you really love your job. The 6th house is also the house of health, and the house of physical well-being. So any planets here and the sign that governs it tells us a great deal about your health, about, I don't know, any sort of like afflictions that you might be prone to. So keep an eye on that. And here we are, up to the 7th house. The 7th house, guys, is the house of partnership and more specifically marriage. But in general, it's the house that governs any sort of partnership that involves a contract. And marriage falls under that umbrella. So in astrology, we've got the 5th house that rules true love, and then we've got marriage, which is a contract. I don't know. You figure it out. Libra is the sign that governs in astrology the 7th house. So Libra is the natural ruler of partnerships. Any planets that you've got in the 7th house can tell us the sort of signs that you're going to get married to and the sort of relationship that you will have with your spouse. It can tell us a great deal about potential divorces, breakups, all this drama. And in general, how you relate to other people, because the 7th house is the opposite of the 1st house, which means that it's the exact opposite of who you are, of how people see you and how you relate to others. Moving on, we are up to the 8th house. And the 8th house is, oh my gosh, the most intense house because it's ruled by Scorpio in general. And it's the house of sex. It's the house of death and rebirth. It's the house of other people's money, other people's resources. And it's a very karmic house. It's a house filled with taboos. No wonder it's filled with taboos since it's ruled by Scorpio. It's also a house of inheritances, so money and, I don't know, any other like assets that come to you through your family. And you can inherit some other stuff from your predecessors, which doesn't necessarily have to be a house. It can be a trauma. It can be a punishment. It can be all sorts of things. So the 8th house is the house of secrets and the house of skeletons in our closet, in one word, amongst all the other things that I've just mentioned. Here we are, up to the 9th house. The 9th house is naturally ruled by Sagittarius. The 9th house is, again, one of my personal favorites. It's the house of long-distance travel. It is the house of the higher mind. It's the house of academia. It's the house of exploration. It's the house of adventurers. It's the house of foreigners and foreign cultures. And it's also the house of religion and philosophy. So all these things that we have to engage the higher mind in. Moving on to the 10th house, guys. This is actually the highest point in general, depending on what sort of house system you use. It's in general one of the highest, it's the highest point in someone's natal chart. So the 10th house is the house of career, so the professional pathway that we choose, as opposed to the 6th house, which indicates the day-to-day work that we engage in. The 10th house is the house of public reputation, of our public persona, of what we put out into the world, and it's the house of what we leave behind into the world as well. The natural ruler of the 10th house is Capricorn. The 11th house is ruled by Aquarius, my sign in general, and it is the house of friendship. It is the house of masses of people who aspire to the same things. It's the house of the internet. Sorry about that, guys. It's the house of the internet. It is the house of progress. It's the house of revolution. It's the house of technology and innovation. All these things that Aquarius rules over. And last but not least, we've got to the 12th house, which is called the house of 12. Called the house of self-undoing, and it's the house where we tend to keep hidden things from other people and also from ourselves. It is a karmic house. It's the house that rules our subconscious, our dreams. It rules all the things that we try to put under the covers subconsciously, and that's basically the point where we are, in general, blindsided from. It's a house that rules isolation and isolated places. It rules mental hospitals. It rules prisons. It's not the most fun house out of them all. But it's also a house where if you've got any planets, it can unlock great potential if you have the courage to go deep down inside of yourself and dig that potential out of there and put it out into the world. So guys, let me know what you think about our introduction to astrological houses, and if you've got any questions, and I shall talk to you soon. Bye!